Jimmy, Luke, Jimmy.
Nice to put a face with the voice.
Oh, it's not the best one.
How are you?
I'm good. How you going?
Look at that beard.
You like that?
It's good. It's
great.
I haven't had a clean-shaven face since October of 2019. I just gave up.
Yeah, I'm the same. Without a beard, I look like I'm about 11 years old, so I just leave it.
Don't give up, Jimmy.
Well, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Are we just going straight into it?
Just going to go straight into it. No, it's just Nathan has been excited about this one for a while, and he kept saying, "Oh, we're going to get Jimmy on. We're going to get Jimmy on." And I'm like, "Yeah." And had a look, and your repertoire is pretty amazing. I'm assuming that's how you guys met, through X Games.
Aren't you going to do an intro?
I do the intro out of it. Remember, we sit down.
Yeah. See, Jimmy, I'm still learning all this. Like, you do the first bit, second stuff. You know.
Hey, it's all part of production.
It's all done in post, mate.
Yeah.
By Luke.
So, how did you guys meet?
Well, I can probably start. Jim, we've probably got two slightly different versions. So I met Jimmy through Nitro World Games, which is kind of our action sports Olympics. So we kind of hit it off pretty well way back in 2016, but it wasn't until 2018 where we actually really worked together. And it was remember when I was a expert sideline commentator live on TV, live on Facebook TV? That's when Jimmy and I spent a shit ton of time together, and he was kind of held my hand through the crazy and scariness of doing live TV.
That's awesome. And
you dove right into the fire and you owned it. You were a natural right out of the gate. Don't listen to anything that he tells you. He was awesome. He was hilarious.
What was the biggest tip that you had to give him? Was it to just keep him in line?
Don't say fuck.
Don't say.
Yeah. I tried that as well, but it doesn't work too well. I think we just allow it.
I was told by the powers that be, if I said fuck live on Facebook, it would be the deal would be terminated, and it would cost Nitro Circus $2 million. And I was like, holy shit, that's a lot of pressure, because I swear all the time. And but I didn't swear. I mean, one of the things I remember so vividly was, and one of the things I really had to learn from Jimmy was, because I had someone talking in my ear the whole time, and whenever that person talked in my ear, you would see me with the microphone. I'm live, and you can just see the wheels turning in my head because I'm listening to this person not talking. I'm Jimmy, help me. How do I do this? He's like, maybe we'll just tell that guy to stop talking in your ear. That's how we fixed it.
That's the hardest thing to figure out when you do that, and especially when it happens the first time and you're not ready for it, and you hear that voice in your head, and especially if you're mid-sentence, and then hearing that and trying to process what's going on without like looking up at the sky like, God, is that, and then just trying to keep your thought process going and then not answer the person back that's talking to you while you're live is another weird thing. And I don't know if you had the ability to do that with the pack that you had, but if you can't turn them down when you're out there on the floor like that, because some of those things, it's one volume and that's it. And you can't hear yourself think sometimes because they come in super hot. It's just like in your ear and you're not expecting it. It's like, what just happened?
I think I remember probably the best advice Jimmy gave me was, don't watch yourself back, because you'll just absolutely destroy yourself, and you'll never want to go on live TV again. He said you know what you're doing wrong, because you almost know straight away when you've made a mistake, and just clean it up the next time. And I think we did 11 of those live events, and from episode 1 to episode 11, Jimmy held my hand the whole time through it. It was such a blast. It was seriously the scariest thing I've ever done, and I'm not afraid of the public eye, but that was like, at the ripe old age of 36, to dive into something brand new was so scary. But Jimmy was my guy. Him and Lorette were my mentor, and it was just such a blast. And we haven't really had a chance to work with each other too much since. And then fast forward to just about a few weeks ago, Jimmy kind of reached out and said, hey, I've been listening to the podcast, and after listening to the Harry one, obviously Jimmy being a big guy in the FMX and action sports world, he said, I think I've got a story that's worth telling. And that's kind of, we've been chatting the last about 3.5 weeks, and now here we are.
Well, I mean, that's a good segue, talking about voices in your head, because I feel like that's how Nathan and I got to this point, having voices in your head telling you the wrong things and stuff like that. But Nathan gave me a little bit of a brief insight into what your story or how your story brought you to want to be on this show. And we'd love you to tell us what happened.
Yeah, it kind of, I had to make notes because there's a lot of it. And over the last couple of weeks of just thinking about it a lot, it kind of went a bunch of different avenues. So I was like, okay, I didn't want to be like a squirrel running all over the place. So I tried to make it, into bullet points. But as far as like a lot of the content from, like, I listened to both of your guys' stories, Harry, Matty Wyatt, and then Matty Morris as well. And it's been my new thing. I don't listen to the radio at the gym anymore. I listen to your guys' podcast when I go work out every day. And it's been awesome because it's been refreshing to hear that you're not alone in this and other people go through similar things and to hear other people's struggles. And I hope that more people listen and get a chance and realize maybe somebody out there needs some help. And they're like, hey, you know what? This isn't all on you. And like one of the things that Nathan, you said in your letter is that almost like once you get to that point, it's like you just feel this immense weight just off of your shoulders, just off of your chest. My story with us started a long time ago. I had a really close friend all the way back in 1993 commit suicide on Christmas Day.
Oh, shit.
And he was sort of a mentor and a really close friend, and we ran a skate park together and whatnot. And it was a really ugly situation just because he was a pretty popular figure in skateboarding. And it just obviously, when something like that happens, everyone's just left with a million questions. People want to point fingers. People want to know why. And you just, in a situation like that, I was really young. I think I was 22 when that happened. And it was just, there were a lot of ugly circumstances that surrounded the thing. First of all, like, you've got the family. So the family doesn't know. You're going through somebody's house and there's things that you don't know about this person, not necessarily bad, but things that parents would be shocked about. Mm-hmm. And they think the wrong things. This particular friend of ours, he had an interest in horror movies and he was really into models and, just cool, like monster stuff and Japanese animation and whatnot. So, parents are going through all that and they're seeing this and thinking like, oh, he was a monster. He was into all this macabre stuff and he had skull posters and stuff all over the wall. And, he was a big fan of guns and whatnot. He had a big gun collection. He had a lot of paintball guns and whatnot. So of course, going through all of that, people automatically assume that this person was just really, really troubled. They're trying to explain that kind of stuff to the family. And then there was local media attention. The local newspapers wrote a really, really terrible story about it all. Wow. Rolling Stone magazine came out. They were on the scene right off the bat. That story didn't actually come out till a year later. And ironically, out of all the publications that did a story on it, they were the only ones that actually did a tribute to the guy and his legacy and got it right. Whereas all the local papers just butchered the whole situation and just, it was so bad. And just, it was hard on the family, especially on his parents. And it was an ugly situation and it was a lot to go through, especially at 22 years old. So that's kind of where all of this started for me, because I was at ground zero with all this. I was in all of those articles for the most part, and to just experience all that at a young age and trying to process all of what was happening. And on top of that, there was a friend involved in the situation during the final days of this person passing away. And I don't know what this person had to gain by this, but when he died, this person ran around and just spouted off all of this nonsense and spread all of this rumor and just these tall tales of things that just never happened. But when you got one person spouting this nonsense, and when someone's passed away, people are going to believe it because they would think, why would this person lie about it? So you had that gas on the fire as well. This idiot was running around telling all these lies. So people start to make their own assumptions. They start pointing fingers. The guy's girlfriend at the time took a lot of the blame, and it was ugly. It was like going around trying to put out all these fires, trying to dispel these rumors, and trying to defend people that needed to be defended that didn't do anything wrong. And at the end of the day, trying to process like, well, why did this happen? At the end of the day, it's, you hate to say it, but it's the person that, did the action. It's on them. And you don't realize that at the time. And sometimes it takes years to figure that out, or sometimes therapy to go through all that, but everyone's looking for a reason. Everyone's looking for something to blame. So it was a rough thing to deal with at an early age. And I never really did anything with that, I guess, angst, if you will, that anger, that raw emotion. And it just kind of got buried and shoved into the corner of my brain. And it would erupt at various points in life, just at the weird, obviously at Christmas, because that's when all that would happen. But, just whenever stressful things would arise in life and things would feel like they were piling up, like all of a sudden that emotion would pop back up and it would lead into these massive eruptions.
And do you think that's because at the time you didn't deal with it the way you should have dealt with it, and kind of how you're dealing with it in more recent times, or what do you put that down to?
Just being young, not knowing any better, and then also that kind of whole thing, like trying to be the tough guy and like,
yep,
you know, just suck it all up. You know, not thinking there's anything necessarily wrong with you. Just being like, hey, you know what, this happens. It comes out these various times. You figure it out. You just go through it. Oh, you know, that was unfortunate, and just kind of shake it off, and then you move on. And obviously, as you get older, you get wiser. You start to figure things out. You know, hindsight's 20/20. You get older, you get wiser. But you know, at the time, a lot of that was just youth, and just trying to just be strong for other people that were in this situation. And like I said, trying to, you know, defend people and trying to squash the rumors and then keep the truth alive.
Yeah, it seems to be a common theme with guests, right? They just kind of forget about themselves when they're in a situation trying to protect others, do right by others, and then all of a sudden they find themselves in a place that they can't get out of without help.
And Jimmy, were you already in sort of the media world when this happened? Were you already presenting and emceeing and stuff like that then?
No, well, kind of, sort of. This had started actually with this particular friend. At the time, we ran a skate park together, and the summer before this had happened, we were in a show together. Matt Hoffman, the BMXer, him and his guys came to
the Matt Hoffman. Luke, you obviously know. No,
I had his video game.
The father of Big Air, Godfather on the Mount Rushmore of BMX for sure.
All right. Yeah, right. Come down. This is Jimmy's day.
Oh, yeah. It's fucking Matt Hoffman. I've met Matt Hoffman in Oklahoma, but carry on. It's not about me.
Well, those guys, when Matt started doing contests, they had their first ever contest at our skate park. They came down to Texas and they put on this massive contest. So that was sort of my introduction into the BMX world. And then a year later, one of the guys that was there for that event came to town and he said, hey, I've got this show at a water slide park. And it's me and my brother and another guy. We're BMXers, but we need a skateboarder and a rollerblader. So they ended up hiring my friend, and I was the backup skater. And this whole thing was choreographed. Like, you had to be in weird spots on the ramps during Van Halen songs. Otherwise, like you run the wrong spot, you were going to get run into. So I had to go out and I had to learn all the routines and everything in case he needed a night off or he got hurt or something. And then the first day of show started and they fired the announcer, and the park manager was like, go get that other skateboarder. He's funny. He's better than this guy. That's what started that whole process.
Did anyone own up to being a rollerblader that day when they asked for a rollerblader, or just Chris Haffey?
No, we had a guy that actually was a regular at the park. As a matter of fact, you know, the rollerbladers, those guys kept the lights on at our skate park.
I used to rollerblade, so I just like to give people shit.
We welcomed them in with open arms. If it wasn't for the 8-wheelers and the BMX guys back in the day, we would have closed that park a long, long time ago. That's so they were welcome. So it was actually a good friend of ours that got the gig. But yeah, so I've been in there. We'd done that for 3 months. And so this unfortunate incident happened, you know, just the Christmas after those shows had ended. So I had dabbled, my toes had been dipped in the proverbial pool, if you will, but I hadn't it hadn't turned into the career. That didn't happen until a couple of years later. So after that had happened, we went to Vegas the next year, did the same show.
Yeah. I mean, the reason I asked that question is that in Australia, I don't know if assuming the media is a little bit different, but in Australia, it's rare to actually report on suicides or go in depth on the news. And for that to happen where the news were just going down all these different roads, was that a bit of a turn off to get into media? Like, was that, I know news was probably something you didn't want to do, but was it ever a turn off to want to be in the spotlight like that?
You know, I never actually thought about it that way, because when I started doing this, I never looked at it in terms of being part of the media. I always thought it was like, oh, it's action sports and it's announcing. So I never really looked at it in those terms, I guess.
Well, I mean, I think you got on the right side, because I mean, action sport, it is just about having fun. So I don't think you would be reporting news stories that.
Mate, we reported live on Facebook. Well, I reported. I was the sideline reporter. It's when Jimmy and I started talking about getting him on, one of the narratives we wanted to talk about is, you know, this whole action sports space and really a lot of really tough humans not being truthful with themselves and the battles they are going through with their kind of own mental health and fitness. And so it's interesting to hear that Jimmy has a story from, you know, almost 30 years ago, and we're kind of in the same spot as you were back then right now, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of the same pressures. I mean, by no means was, you know, action sports in a spot that it is now, where, you know, you've got all these TV platforms and whatnot, but it was a lot of the same struggles. And I mean, when you get into this, like, no matter what you're doing, like skateboarding, BMX, you know, freestyle motocross, whatever you do, like, you know, you get into this predominantly in your teens. You know, you start off really young, and it seems like every year, you know, they're younger and younger in the different sports. And especially now with the Olympics being a thing with skateboarding and BMX and surfing, it's like you get into this, and it's like it's the same thing with mainstream sports too. I mean, it's not like you get a set of rules and someone teaches you how to be a responsible adult and manage money and manage your life. All of a sudden you just go from, like, you know, most normal kids are going to school, you know, and living normal lives, and all of a sudden you're getting plucked out of the norm and you're getting sent all over the world, and you're getting sponsorship dollars thrown at you, and you're on television, and, you know, you get all this fame and notoriety, and it's a lot to handle. It's a lot to handle at a young age. And it's not like anyone ever sits you down and says, okay, you're going to have X, Y, and Z to deal with, and this is how you cope with it. You just kind of, off you go. You pack your bag and you go, and sink or swim, I guess. You know?
And then that's kind of the COVID kind of shutting the action sports industry down really shone a light on what a lot of us weren't prepared for, right? And yourself included.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm kind of like a squirrel. I've always saved up for a long winter, and I've always had stuff aside in savings just in case, because you never know when you're going to have a bad year. Little did I think that a bad year was going to be a bad year for the entire planet. Mm-hmm. But, you know, for a lot of guys, it's just all of a sudden, it's like, what do you do? I mean, take COVID out of the whole situation. What do you do when you reach the end and you suddenly aren't viable for a competition scene anymore, or you start to go through some injuries and you can't put yourself out there like you could? Mm-hmm. And what do you do then? You know, there's not like there's anyone out there like putting up savings accounts. Like, some guys manage it better than others. And again, not putting anybody down when I say this, but it's a harsh reality. And, you know, I've seen this before where some people can cope with it and others can't. Sometimes when the struggle's out there, a lot of guys don't want to ask for help, or they just don't know how to deal with it, or what to do, or what path to try to go down, or who to even talk to at that point. And it just spirals out of control, and it seems to pile up.
Yeah. Wow. And when was the breaking point for you to kind of speak to get therapy and kind of get help? Like when, why, how, what?
For me, it was the summer of 2019. And my thing has always been, like, when I started doing this full time and traveling a lot in the earlier years before I started doing the TV stuff, it was a lot of time doing smaller shows like state and county fairs, a lot of sporting events, lots of shows at schools. I mean, there were times you pack up and go, and I'd be on the road for, you know, 3, 4, 5, sometimes even 6 months without ever going home. And it's fun, especially when you're younger and you're seeing the world and you're getting to do all these fun things, but everyone looks at you like, oh, you've got the dream life and you get to do all this fun stuff, and it's a party 24/7. And it's like, yeah, you get to do some fun stuff and it's a charmed life, but it also takes its toll because you don't have any normality in your life. You know, I mean, you miss out on a lot of things. You don't get to see your friends. You don't get to see your loved ones a lot. And, you know, it's a lot, you know, you're around a bunch of people, but at times it gets really, really lonely. Yep. And just, again, as things happen over the years, you just kind of like, you go through these moments and you get a little bummed out. And for me, it's always just been bottle it up, shove it in a corner in the back of your mind and forget about it. Plus, as an announcer or doing stuff on television, sometimes if you're not in the best of moods, you don't have the option of being in a bad mood. You gotta have the game face on, and you've got to go. And you've got to get out there and do the job. Because if you have a breakdown or you lose it on whatever gig you're doing, whether it's a live event and announce deal or a television program, like,
You're not
out of there.
coming back. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was one of the bad things that I inherited from my dad, because he was in the media and he was the same. He was the life of the party anywhere he went, and he was always expected to be that. So the kind of the attitude and the excitement that he'd have on radio and TV, he'd bring home, and he would always have it. And then we found out years later that behind closed doors, he wasn't the happiest guy in the room, and he was struggling. And I think I just always saw him as happy, and I always thought, oh, I guess I always have to be happy then. And then it wasn't until last year that I kind of started sharing how I feel, and that's how we're here.
That's exactly it. I mean, I've had people say that to me all the time, like, oh, you always seem so happy. It's like, well, yeah, because you put on the game face because you're out there doing your thing. And I mean, one of the things that Nathan had said was that, you walk into the room and you've got to be the funniest guy in the room, and you've always got to be on. So no matter what you're going through, it's like, once you walk through that door, it's like, okay, you just flip that switch and you go. And it's almost like putting whatever's really going on in your head and in your heart, you just put it on pause until you get back home, or you get back to the hotel room, or wherever you're at where you're alone. And then you can go back into sulk mode and just kind of brood on it.
I bet like on those tours and stuff like that, that you forget to unpause those feelings, and like you just end up going for months at a time trying to be the happiest and funniest guy in the room.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a combination of things. I mean, maybe you've got something going on at home. A lot of times, you're sharing hotel rooms, or you're on a bus together, or you're just with a group of people, and you don't have any privacy. So if you have something going on, you don't really have any time to kind of just like sit down and just maybe you don't even have anything going on. You just don't have any time to be by yourself and just sort of decompress. And it's one of those things where in my later years, I've learned to make time for that and go find time to go be by myself and just kind of be in my own zone. Whereas before, when I was younger, it's, oh no, we got to be part of the group. And if you're not part of the group, then what's wrong? What's going on? So that was a big part of the learning process and all this, was figuring out how to make time for yourself and just, how to be, I guess, rested, for lack of a better term, and just, being in your own okay space.
Yeah, it's nuts. My another sort of question I've always had for Nathan, but like you would probably feel this especially as well, but being surrounded by all of the action stars and not necessarily being the one going over jumps and doing all the crazy shit. Like, there's a lot of people, because it is action sports, there's a lot of people that die doing action sports, and you guys would probably get really close to a wide range of people over a long period of time. How does that affect you when sort of things like that happen to people that you get close to?
Yeah, that's I had to think long and hard about getting to that topic, and I made a lot of notes about that, actually, because I knew that was going to come up, and it's kind of a sensitive issue, but it needs to be talked about. It's the elephant in the room, for sure. I mean, it's been a thing where we've lost quite a few people over the last 10 years in the action sports community. Some, in the active whatever sport that they're a part of, and some in other ways. And that was part of, going back to Nathan's question, that was part of all this, and why I ended up having my breakdown point, and why I ended up going and talking to a professional in the first place, was I went through this run where a lot of that started to happen. And especially in 2017, there were quite a few that happened, and a couple of them were literally like back to back to back. And it was one thing right after another, and I just never dealt with it. And it was, like I was saying earlier, it was a nonstop year of just keep the game face on. We lost Dave Mira in 2016, and that one, Dave and I were very, very close. I mean, I only saw him at events, really, but that one, just when I heard about that one took me back to what happened to my friend in 1993. There was a lot of similarities there, so it sort of brought a lot of those feelings back. And then in 2017, there was also times too where at X Games, for example, or other events, when you've lost someone, there's a memorial and there's a tribute. So in 2016, that year at X Games, we did a Dave Mira memorial event. It was a BMX Park Best Trick competition, and we did a live tribute on television. And so I was telling Nathan this earlier last week, that I spent weeks just obsessing over that because it terrified me. I was worried about, you know, losing it and coming apart on national television during that. And then like anything else, once you get up to that moment and then you got to do it. I mean, just game face, you know, you go into work mode and it happens and you get through it. But it was definitely an emotional outpouring at the end of that. Kevin Robinson and I were the announce team at the time. And, you know, we both looked at each other afterwards when we went to commercial break, and it was, you know, waterworks. I mean, we were both a mess. I mean, that was a tough one. And then we lost Kevin at the end of 2017. So I had to do a memorial the following year at X Games for Kevin. And, you know, that was tough because it was like, I'm out there in front of all these people at the venue in Minneapolis, and there's Matt Hoffman, you know, and all Kevin's peers, and there's Kevin's family, and there's Dave's family. And that was a really, really hard one. I've had to do a couple of them at Winter as well. And don't get me wrong. I'm honored that they asked me to go do this, but it takes a lot. It takes an emotional toll. And I'm not saying poor me by saying this. It's a lot to get out there, whether you knew the person or not. You want to do it justice and you want to do it right, especially for their family and their friends. But you know, it's a lot on your shoulders, and it's a super, super stressful thing. And that one in 2017, because Kevin and I were pretty close, that was a tough one. And I mean, that one stung. And I remember after it was over with, I turned around and one of the live event announcers, Daryl Now, was out there, and I went behind the control tower, and I lost it. And he was there, and you know, he'd give me a big hug, and I can never thank that guy enough for his words that day and the way that he kind of talked me off the ledge. But it was a lot to process. And then I got home from, you know, that event, or actually going back to 2017, that X Games, I lost a close friend to suicide, and then the next day I lost one of my longtime producers who had a heart attack. So it was just like one thing right after the other. And again, you know, you bottle it all up and you just shove it in a dark corner of your brain. So finally summer of 2019 rolled around, and I was just sitting around. It was, you know, it was a particularly tough year. Summer was just stressful, not anything major. There wasn't one major incident or anything. I think that all of this had just balled up so much, and it just become this boulder of just bad energy. And I was sitting at this place down the street from my house, this local pool, and I just started crying. And like Nathan's story, I didn't know why.
Yeah.
I just started not hysterically, but I was tearing up, and I didn't know why. Yeah. And I just felt horrible, and I couldn't process what it was. And I was like, what's wrong? This week's been fine. Like there's nothing really going on. And then I reached out to a friend of mine and his wife, and she told me about this app. It's called Talkspace. So instead of going and paying whatever $200, because we don't have healthcare in this country, you got to pay through the nose for it. So instead of going and paying $200 to go talk to a therapist for one session for an hour, you pay that for basically a month, and you have someone, you pick your therapist, and you kind of go through some questions about what you're experiencing, and they give you some options, and you pair yourself up with a therapist. And then you have this person at your disposal for the entire month for what would cost you an hour to go see someone in person. And it's awesome because it's done through this app, and it's a lot of texting, but you have the option to do video conferencing and whatnot. And within the first 15 minutes of talking to this woman, I automatically felt better. I felt so much better. And I just felt like I had this enormous weight lifted off my shoulders and my chest. And I remember she actually called me, and we talked for like 25 minutes. And I remember like crying afterwards, but it was like, you know, tears of joy. Cause it was like, finally I'm getting some answers, and I'm processing stuff. And in the course of talking to her, like we went down all these avenues that I never thought, things that I never thought would have come up that, you know, came into play in the bigger picture. And it was amazing.
That's awesome. It sounds like peer here a little bit, but yeah. I can only imagine that America's probably had it in place for a while. It's sort of only a new thing in Australia. So hopefully that picks up here, because I know that there would be so many people in the same situation that would really rather not go and see a therapist, but
can't afford,
can't afford it.
Can't afford it still.
Our
healthcare is great, but I still pay $250 to talk to that shrink, but it's money well spent for me. But I know the reality is there is a lot of people that cannot afford that luxury.
It's just got to be made easier like that, doesn't it?
I think that's a large part of the problem here, at least in the US, is that people can't afford it. 'Because like I said, it's, you know, on average, it's $150 to $200 for a 1 hour session. And then, you know, you have the option to And I mean, I was even reticent to do it. I think I got a promotional rate for the first month, and
Groupon.
I was like, this is the best. And I ended up, I kept, it was July of 2019. So I stayed on that app for a good 6 months.
That's great.
And what you also, it's funny when Jimmy and I have been kind of talking so much the past few weeks, and I shared that letter with him. And you mentioned you had a bit of a meltdown on the last tour that we were together in 2018 when we were doing those Facebook events. And you had to kind of deal with that behind closed doors in a hotel room.
Yeah, and this is on a smaller scale, and this was more of a just being angry about things. Going back to my friend who passed away in 1993, and reporters in the media. So we had this reporter come around to we have this little, I guess you'd call it a club. It's a private warehouse that a bunch of guys get together, and we all kick in a share for the rent. We have a bowl and whatnot. So this reporter was kicking around, and she wanted to do a story about that friend, and she was asking a bunch of people questions. So it got pointed my direction, and I talked to her, and I sat her down. I said, well, what do you want to do? And she said, oh, no, I promise you this is a tribute piece. I want to talk about his legacy to skateboarding, what he means to, skaters today, and how you guys celebrate his legacy all these years later. And I was like, fine, I'd be more than happy to talk to you about that. I'm on board with that. So she came out to an event, and we talked, and she started asking all these juicy questions about the bullshit that happened back in 1993. And I stopped her, said, listen, turn the tape recorder off. Said, we've already gone down this path. I've told you I'm not talking about that stuff. It's already been done a long time ago. Leave it alone. If you want to talk about his legacy and how we celebrate him and remember him, awesome. If you want to go dig up all this old crap, I'm not going to talk to you, and neither is anybody else here. So she tried for the better part of a week to get me to talk about this stuff. And there were a couple of people that did talk to her, and I called her after the fact and said, hey, don't listen to those guys. They remember things differently. And I heard some of the stuff they said. It's not factual. Don't put that in your story. I was like, he still has family in the area. This is going to suck. Don't do it. And she promised me, and she swore to me it wasn't going to happen. So, of course, a month and a half goes by. And what did she do? She went and dug up an old article from back in 1994 and basically paraphrased. Her entire article was literally paraphrased from somebody else's work. Oh, wow. And then she stuck a couple of sentences in there and then tagged my name in there. So people thought I said this crap. And I was like, oh man. So it was a big, ugly situation. And I got a lot of flack from it, from people in our skate community around here. So fast forward 2 years later, we were on that tour, and I get back to the room that night, and I got tagged in this Facebook post about an article. That lady had moved on from the magazine she was in. She started another local magazine, and then she reposted that story again, but she wrote a new paragraph that made it sound like she was talking about the premiere of a new skate video, and she made it sound like she went back to our skate park and re-interviewed us and then just cut and pasted the same story again. So I flew off the handle because I was like, what? Leave it alone. Yeah. And I came unglued, and I got so mad, and there's nothing you could do about it. It's 10 o'clock at night, so it wore me down, and I was a mess. And I didn't, I was in the hotel room by myself, and I was just a mess that whole night and the whole trip to the airport the next morning. And then I came home with a full head of steam. I was like, all right, I'm getting to the bottom of this, which I ended up, clear heads prevail. I ended up writing an email to the main editor of that magazine and basically said that, hey, listen, this is old news. This is all cut and pasted from something that was written in 1994. And on top of this person never even came back to the skate park. So that's a lie in itself. If you want to do a story about skateboarding, here's 7 people that you can reach out to, 7 reasons why you could talk about awesome things about skateboarding in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, and get this off of your paper. And they wrote me back an hour and a half later, and they were like, you know what? We looked at it and we agree with you. We're going to pull this article. And I was like, thank you. Wow. Thank you so much.
Sounds like my ongoing war with the Daily Mail. I've been fighting with the Daily Mail for the best part of 12 months, Jimmy. And a big reason for that is they've gone and attacked a bunch. They've attacked Matty Wyatt, which we talk about, and then in more recent times went after Harry Bink as well. So I have a fractured friendship with the press, and in particular the Daily Mail, who are just trash and do exactly this. They put out trash content that does nothing but hurt people.
It's sensationalism, and they need something juicy. And I mean, with our media here in the US, I mean, if it bleeds, it leads. I mean, our news looks like a movie trailer, every night. You know, it's like murder, mayhem, accidents, floods, pestilence, and the weather and sports.
Yeah.
It's just, you know, so this lady, I mean, it was a small, crummy freebie newspaper that circulates in the area. I don't even know how many people even saw it. But it's, you know, just the fact that she was that adamant about making a name for herself, that she needed to A, go dredge up some crap that happened over 2 decades ago, you know, and throw somebody under the bus. And B, it wasn't even her own research. She went and just copied a Rolling Stone article.
Plagiarized.
You know?
The reason why I did ask Jimmy that was because I thought it was not funny that he said that. Because I've kind of really looked up to and admired Jimmy and kind of definitely felt him as a mentor in that kind of line of work of commentary I was going. And like literally 3 doors down in the same hotel, it was kind of right when my demons were really starting to surface, and probably I was at a point where I probably was starting to lose a little bit of control. Like the Facebook Live stuff was a good thing for me to focus on, but when that wasn't happening, I was kind of spiraling up and down and up and down, and you kind of get in that vicious tour cycle of what Jimmy was saying earlier, is you don't get that alone time, but you also you don't really talk to these really good friends about the real stuff. Like you're just having all the good time stuff, and that was kind of part of the story we wanted to tell today. Like everyone's going through similar stuff, right? And you can talk about it. And Jimmy and I could have had a conversation. We could have knocked on each other's door literally that night. We were going through the same things after it was my first ever live throwdown. So I was like on a high, but then I knew I was dealing with all this not dealing with all this other stuff. And we could have had a conversation where we both would have felt infinitely better straight away, but we didn't do it because you don't know what you don't know, and we didn't know what each other was going through.
Exactly.
I mean, Nath, I think you put in the notes that how do we change this narrative in especially action sports of being okay to talk about your feelings? But to straight away rebuttal that, I think you and Jimmy and Harry are all doing it already. Like these are the first steps of making it okay to chat about this stuff to your friends, and especially being in a public sense like this. Like that's out there now. So now, hopefully, other riders and other action sports people are all just going, okay, well, yeah, I guess we can do it. If Jimmy and Nathan and Harry can do it, and anyone can do it.
Yeah, I think that's the message we want out there for sure.
I mean, that's my hope. I mean, when I started to hear your story and started listening to the podcast, I was like, I mean, all of your stories, everything I've listened to so far, there were bits and pieces of every story that I listened to that was like, I understand that. I identify with that. I've been there. And I just, if one person listens to this and they're going through a similar struggle, whoever you are, sit down, find a friend, anyone,
exactly.
Talk about it, because, living in that darkness is just no fun. And it takes you to some really, really, crappy places, and I mean, I can't express this enough. When you finally get it out, whether it's talking to a friend, a professional, a family member, it's like the weight of the world lifted off your shoulders. I mean, I was laughing and crying when I got off that app or off the phone with that therapist on the first session that I had. And I was excited. It was like having a new best friend. I was excited to talk to the person. She gave me homework. I was like you. I had to write a journal and I had to make notes. And she gave me these little tests that we had to go down these different avenues. And she made me talk about different things. And it put a lot of things in perspective, not just in, what I was experiencing with, deaths and it put a lot of things in perspective in my life as a whole, just how I deal with adversity, trouble, anxiety, because I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, but I still, to this day, I still get nervous before a big event. I still sit there and I get butterflies and I think I'm going to throw up. And I mean, it doesn't matter. 21 years into the first event, I still freak out.
My dad always said that's just because you give a shit. That's the only reason why you get
nervous. That's what I've said for years. Like the minute you stop feeling those butterflies and those nerves before you go out and go live, means you should quit, because it means you stop caring.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, I think like Trav and all the dirt bikers say the same thing. If you're not feeling that, you're in grave danger of getting hurt.
Which is why they keep going crazier and crazier, I think, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's an interesting comment, because Mike Mason had mentioned that to me a while back, because he's been in the booth with me at X Games for a while now for freestyle motocross. And he said, like, I stopped I stopped concentrating and I started doing goofy things, and I'd be in the middle of a trick and I'd be thinking about, what am I going to have for dinner that night? What are we going to do later? And I was like, time to stop.
Yeah.
And I get it.
I think
and for those guys, especially, man.
Yeah. Well, it's like Mace is like one of my longest time friends. I met him on the Krusty Tour way back in 2006, I think. He's one of the small minority in action sports, all the disciplines, who's gone out on his own terms. Like, not too many people get that luxury, because they are dead. These sports kill, and these sports break most of the guys off, and it's got a short lifespan, and they're done early, which is kind of a big part of why we have this big problem of people struggling with their mental health and not talking about it. And Mike Mason is the most recent example of a guy going out on his own terms, and it was heartbreaking for all of us, because he's a good vibe guy. Like, he's a guy that gets the tour vibe going at an all-time high, and he just walked away. Now he plays golf I don't know how he earns a living, but he plays golf off scratch. So hi, Mace.
He was smart with his money, did some investing. He's got some rental properties and whatnot. So yeah, every time I see him on social media, he's out golfing. He's having the time of his life.
Be like Mace.
Yeah, be like Mace. That'll be the hashtag for this show, I think. So what about these days, Jimmy? Do you still continue with the therapy currently?
I had stopped after I'd gotten to a certain point. So I'd also put this in my notes, and I kind of touched on this with Nathan as well. So the end of 2019, right around the holiday, actually right around our Thanksgiving here, I had a very, very close friend go into the hospital, and we ultimately lost him. And that one was hard. I mean, I'd known him since he was 14 years old. I was kind of like a big brother to him, and we'd been talking a lot in the last year and a half that he was around, and just like weird medical situation. He ended up in ICU, and then we were going to the hospital every day. He was in a coma, and that one was tough because I was actually there when they took him off of life support. And had I not gone through what I had gone through with that app and that therapy, I would have handled that in a completely different manner. And I don't know how I would have processed that, especially with the holidays coming up again. But the things that I learned through that app and talking to that therapist that I was paired up with, it gave me the coping mechanisms to deal with that, and to deal with it properly, and not just fall apart. And just completely barricade myself off from people. I talked about it. I mean, I was there for my friends and to help out with the family and whatnot, but I was open about it. I talked about it, and, talked with other friends about it, and tried to help other friends through that by telling them about that app, because it shocked a lot of guys in our skate community around here, and it was a tough one. So I was out after that, and then the pandemic hit. I went back to work. We had Winter X Games, and then the pandemic hit, and I was like, "Oh, all right." So shelter in place. So I haven't been back on there since. I've done pretty good. I've used the tools that I was given, and I haven't gone back there. I do owe that lady an email, because she's probably wondering what happened to me and if I survived all this. Because like, she really got into it. I mean, she went as far, like, she would watch broadcasts, like she would watch X Games, and she would watch our Nitro shows or anything we did on Facebook Live, and then she would call me after, and she would ask me questions, and she would send me feedback and notes about certain things. One of the interesting things that we talked about was with what goes on in our world with the crashes and whatnot. She said, you have a bit of PTSD. It's post-traumatic stress, because you get to see these amazing things, but at the same time, you also watch people that you know and care about go through some pretty horrific injuries. Yeah. And it has to be extremely traumatizing at times to see someone you care about crash, and you don't know what condition they're in, and you have to sit there and keep a straight face and talk about it. And I was like, I never thought about it like that, not in any way, shape, or form. And she brought it up. Actually, it was X Games that year. James Foster went down in Big Air and broke his femur. And she sent me a text. She's like, "Hey, do you know that guy?" I was like, "Yeah." And she's like, "So there you go. Case in point. You just watched one of your friends go down. You don't know what his condition is. And then you had to pop on." I wasn't working that event, but Mace and I were on next for, I think, Moto X Best Trick that night. And I had to do an injury update. She's like, "There you are, calm, cool, and collected, reading this update about your friend." And she's like, "Did you know what happened to him the rest of the night?" I'm like, "I didn't find out till we got off air." She's like, "Great. Was that in the back of your mind?" I said, "The entire time."
Yeah. Wow.
That's crazy.
She was like, "There you go." She's like, "You go through these stressful situations where you have to see it's amazing. But at the same time, like if one of your friends is going to do a brand new trick and you don't know if they're going to make it or not, like it wears on you. And she's like, it's part of the spectrum of PTSD. And I was like, well, I never really thought of it like that.
No, I've never either.
Yeah, sounds like she did her job a little too well, because she basically has just given you all the tools and no need to revisit.
Oh, she was stoked. She was like, so what do you do for a living? And I explained it to her and she's like, wait, what? And like, she got into it. She's like, oh, so you travel the world a lot. Like, it was kind of cool. Like, we'd talk about stuff and therapy, and she'd give me these little homework assignments and whatnot. But then she'd also be like, you ever been to Norway? And she'd just start texting me pictures of her last cruise she took to Norway. And she's like, where haven't you been? So, I mean, it was really cool. Like, she was into it. So, I mean, but she did her homework, and, you know, it helped. And it really, like I said, it helped out in a lot of areas in my life. Just dealing with stupid stuff, like getting angry in traffic, you know, or being in a long line at the airport, or just, you know, dealing with some asshole sitting next to you in an airplane that's being rude to everyone. It was a blanket. It was tools to just be a better you as a whole.
That guy. Don't sit next to Nathan on a plane.
I'm actually really good on the planes. I kind of try and control the annoying people for the most part. I don't drink too much in airplanes these days. Good. So, hey, Jimmy, you're the pun king. I didn't really tell Luke about your punniness. Yes, I love this. Tell Luke about your most recent adventure.
My most recent adventure?
Going into the baking industry.
My new little side hustle, huh?
He's got a side hustle.
Is this legal baking or is it different?
Oh, yes. Baking? Yes.
Everything's legal in Texas, bro.
All right.
They're burning masks. Texas is open, bro.
There is no baking with the devil's lettuce over here. Texas is 100% open, much to the chagrin of many. I don't know. It depends on where you're at in the state. Some people are like, yeah, America. And other people are like, wear a mask. Fortunately, I'm in a big enough city to where most people are being responsible, but you get out in certain areas and like, what are you doing with that thing on your face?
That's great.
I can't breathe in this thing. And these are also the guys that pour $300 worth of deer urine over their face and sit in a blind for 8 hours trying to shoot a large dog.
There's the quote for the show.
With 27 guns.
Yeah. I can't breathe in this thing. Really? You had no problem wearing that when you drank a 12-pack. So when shelter in place happened, you get bored, you know? And during, I was like, all right, well, I'm gonna, you do the usual stuff. Like you get on Zoom with friends and you laugh and you sit around, you drink. I went through the whole Tiger King thing in like 48 hours and I rewatched Game of Thrones. And then after a while, I was like, all right, well, I'm bored. So I have a bunch of power tools in the garage. So I was building stuff for a little while. I was like, you know what? I'm going to learn how to make bread. So I started making bread, and then people started challenging me with things like, hey, can you make this? So I started trying to bake all these different things. So it's just evolved into this thing over the last year. So my little side hustle, I'm going to do a little small bakery and sell things out of my house. And what he's trying to get me, what he's trying to lead me to.
The suspense is killing me.
The kicker. What's the kicker, Jimmy? Can we reveal this worldwide exclusive?
What's the name?
I live in this fun little area of Dallas known as East Dallas. So it's Yeast Dallas Baking Company.